Welcome to the Insight Meditation Community of Charlottesville, Virginia. You can find all of our program offerings and information about our Sangha at www.imeditation.org. We meet weekly on Tuesday evenings at 7 p.m. Eastern Time, currently on the Zoom platform, for meditation and a Dharma talk given by one of our teachers. We also meet daily at noon Eastern Time on Zoom for sitting practice. We hope you can join us.
We have a really special evening tonight. For those of you I don't know, I know most of you, but my name is Liz Reynolds, and I have the great honor of introducing our guest teacher tonight. And welcome you also to the Insight Meditation Community of Charlottesville. So I'm going to back out and just introduce Tuere, Sala, who's coming in to us from Seattle, where it's better weather than here, from what I understand, a bit cooler. So I'm just going to introduce, just read a bit about Tuere and then pass it over. So Tuere is a guiding teacher at Seattle Insight Meditation Society, also at Spirit Rock Retreat Center. She's a retired prosecuting attorney who has practiced Vipassana meditation for over 30 years. Tuere is committed to lay practice and also inspired by bringing the Dharma to non-traditional places. She is a strong advocate for practitioners living with high stress, past trauma, and difficulty sitting still. Tuere has been teaching since 2010 and has a long history of assisting others in establishing and maintaining a daily practice. And I'll just say personally, Tuere has a very, very busy teaching schedule this year, and I'm really grateful that you found time for us. We're all really glad to have you. So I will pass it over. Thanks so much, Tuere, and welcome again.
This is the dilemma that we all come to, this place. There's a reason why we practice. It's not random. It may seem random in your life, as in showing up, but there's a way in which we have been looking for an answer for many, 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 many years, all of us, since we were very little, looking for some answer. And the Dhamma is sort of the answer that we've been looking for, but the Dhamma itself doesn't lend itself for the way we are raised to respond. So I want to read a sutta. This is one of my favorite suttas. I like suttas, but this one I like more than anything else because it is translated by 3 different people. I'm not going to read the whole sutta. I'm just going to read a small portion of it. But it's translated by 3 different people. And I'd like you to hear through the translation how the Buddha described the world he lived in before his enlightenment. 3 different ways of hearing the same thing. The first way we're going to listen to is by Andrew Olinsky. This is the way Andrew translated these verses. This is what the Buddha said. Fear is born from arming oneself. Arming oneself would be like embracing violence. So fear is born from arming oneself. Just see how many people fight. And I'll tell you about dreadful fear that caused me to shake all over. Seeing creatures flopping around like fish in water too shallow, so hostile with one another. Seeing this, I became afraid. This world completely lacks essence. It trembles in all directions. I longed to find a place, unscathed, but I could not see it. Seeing people locked in conflict, I became completely distraught. But then I discerned here a thorn, hard to see, lodged deep in the heart. It's only when pierced by this thorn that one runs in all directions. So if that thorn is taken out, one does not run and settles down. That's Andrew's interpretation. Here's John Ireland's interpretation. Same thing. Violence breeds misery. Look at people quarreling. I will relate the emotion agitating me. Having seen people struggling and contending with each other like fish in a small amount of water, fear entered me. The world is everywhere insecure. Every direction is in turmoil. Desiring an abode for myself, I did not find one uninhabited. When I saw contention as the sole outcome, aversion increased in me. But then I saw an arrow here, difficult to see, set in the heart. Pierced by it, one runs in every direction. But having pulled it out, one does not run and does not sink. And then, of course, Thanissaro Bhikkhu, last one. When embraced, the rod of violence breeds danger and fear. Look at people quarreling. I will tell you how I experienced dismay, seeing people floundering like fish in small puddles, competing with one another. As I saw this, fear came into me. The world was entirely without substance. All the directions were knocked out of line. Wanting a haven for myself, I saw nothing that wasn't laid claim to. Seeing nothing in the end but competition, I felt discontent. And then I saw an arrow here, so very hard to see, embedded in the heart. Overcome by this arrow, you run in all directions. But simply by pulling it out, you don't run, you don't sink. This is the world that the Buddha was describing, that he lived in. It sounds a lot like our world, doesn't it? It doesn't. The first time I heard someone read this, I was stunned that the Buddha's world, I don't know how I had it in my mind that the Buddha had some peaceful world that he lived in. It was all easy. Probably that whole old adage of, oh yeah, it was easier back then. We're coming up on the ends of times now, but back then it was better. But it's not. We're in the same place we've always been. Anyone that was alive around 1974, we had to sit in gas lines for 2 hours, 3 hours just to get one tank of gas. And it was so rationed you could not get more than one tank of gas. And I remember when I was in high school, my father used to make us go stand in the lines to get the gas, to go sit in the lines with our cars or take a gas can and then carry that gas can all the way to the house. He would make us do it. I remember when Carter was wearing a sweater trying to convince us to turn the heat down to 69. I mean, it feels as though everything that's happening right now is happening for the first time, but it's not. We have been in wars and rumors of wars as a species for eons. We have hurt each other and caused difficulty and destabilization and pain and suffering for eons. People after people after people. We are living in the same times we have always lived in. Even though in our minds it seems as though it's very different. But Buddha's words were 2,600 years ago, over 2,600 years ago. And yet I can read it to you and you can say, yeah, I got that. That's the way it is. That's the difficulty I'm having here. So there's something that the Buddha's pointing to, though, that it goes against the grain of what we're taught. That's why we have to have Sangha, because we won't do it otherwise. It goes against the grain of what we believe and the way the egoic mind thinks and the way the world operates. It's not out there. The solution to all of our difficulty and stress and struggle is not out there. So when I grew up in a house that was extremely violent. My mother was very passive. My father was very outwardly aggressive. And he was very angry because of how bad the country was for him. I mean, it was just hard to be a black man. He had a degree in engineering and he couldn't get a job except as a clerk. And so he was always very angry. And of course, the only people he could really take it out on was his kids. I mean, I don't think my mom would have put up with too much of that. So mostly it was us. He drank a lot and he was miserable. So I grew up in a world where misery, being angry, being miserable, fighting and fighting your way through was the way it was supposed to be. That's the way I thought it was going to be. So I set in motion this plan. I'm going to go to law school. Well, I wasn't planning on going to law school. I was planning on getting a PhD in philosophy and be the first black female PhD in the world in philosophy. That's what my plan was. But by the time I got through college, that didn't seem like I was going to make a lot of money. So I went to law school instead. So all I had to do is get through law school. We got it. I'm going to make a lot of money. And I am not going to be like my parents. I was smart. So getting through college, getting through law school, I had 2 kids. I was a single parent on welfare. It didn't matter because I was just going to get through law school, get a good job, make a lot of money. I'm going to have it solid. That was it. And I failed the bar. Who knew? I mean, I never failed anything in my life, and then I failed the bar. So I pretty much chalked that up as systems racist. It doesn't have anything to do with me. I'm going to take it again. I'll pass it. I took the bar a second time and failed it a second time. And when I failed the bar the second time, all hell broke loose for me because I could not fathom how I could live, what I should do. What did this mean? Did this mean I was going to end up struggling all the time like my parents? Does this mean I'm not smart enough to be a lawyer? I mean, what does it mean exactly when you fail the bar the second time? It's all about me now. And I can remember having this overwhelming dread and anxiety about what I was going to have to live with, because everything I had lived up to that point was just get through the next semester and everything's going to be great. Just get through the next situation and everything's going to be great. Just get through this. Just get through this. Just get through the bar. Everything's going to be great. And here I came face to face with this reality that I may not be able to get through the bar. So this anxiety we feel, sometimes this anxiety, this fear we have, this uncertainty about what's going to happen, a lot of that is our own coming face to face with the fact that we don't control much of our lives. And when I came face to face with that second failure, I'd been practicing Christianity the whole time, but I just wanted to find something that I could go and practice that didn't depend on situations being good and happy. I kind of came to this resolve that I'm probably not going to be happy. I'm going to be like my parents. I'm just going to struggle my whole life. So at least if I have kids, I want to be happy in the midst of all that mess. And I stumbled upon this book by Trungpa Rinpoche. I didn't know anything about Trungpa Rinpoche's life. Now I look back and say, if I knew about Trungpa before I stumbled upon that book, I probably wouldn't have read it. But the goodness was, I didn't know anything about him. And I read the book. And when I read this book, it was the Tibetan Lojong practice, the 59 slogans. And when I opened this book at the bookstore, the first slogan that stuck out to me was abandon all hope of fruition. And coming from a Christian background, the idea that you would abandon all hope that everything works out, that didn't make any sense to me. The book was entitled Mind Training, Cultivating Loving Kindness. How are you going to cultivate loving kindness if you abandon all hope of fruition? And I remember that dichotomy right there was the thing that caused me to buy that book and to understand what is it that he was saying. So every day I would read a slogan and I would reflect and contemplate on his commentary about what was he saying. Just what are you saying here exactly? What does this mean? Drive all blames into one. What does that mean? I got to take responsibility for everybody's mess? What does that mean exactly? I just kept staying close to what he said, and I practiced sitting quietly, reading the slogan, on and on and on. And the more I read the slogans, the more I began to get softer on the inside. I remember this one time, I was sitting with my two boys and we were watching TV and this commercial came on of these two plants. We lived in Kansas City, Missouri at the time. So there were these two plants. They were like two weeds, like Laurel and Hardy, for those of you that know that. One was tall and thin and one was short and fat. And they were rushing with their suitcases trying to go down the road and get out of town. And so one was like, do you think we're going to make it? Do you think we're going to make it? And the other one's like, I don't know. Let's just keep going. Let's just keep going. And then this giant boot, which was Roundup, weed killer, just stepped in front of these two plants and squirted them, and they died. I lost it. I mean, I cried for those two weeds more than I had ever cried for anything in my life. I lost it. And my boys were sitting there trying to figure out what just happened to Mama. And I'm trying my best to tell them, they just wanted to get out of the town. Why does it have to be so much harm to them? I don't think I ever felt that much compassion for any other being at that moment in my life. At that moment in my life, I had spent so much time just surviving and trying to get things and take care of me and the boys and get everything right and get through law school and get through, that there just was no time to be considering the harm that could come to someone else. And then here I was sitting there realizing that I could have. Just going to check and make sure. I think I need to pull this thing up. I can see if I can't see the screen, you probably can't see me either. There, that's better. So I had never up to that point felt such a sense of compassion for another being, even though it was a cartoon. I mean, a little cartoon character. It was this felt sense of suffering. Now you might think, I don't want to feel that kind of suffering. I don't want to feel suffering such that if I see a little commercial that upsets me, I'm going to cry. But that was the beginning of a thawing is what I think was happening. I was thawing out. I was taking this thorn that was in my heart lodged, that I couldn't see it. It was beginning to thaw out. I was beginning to see other beings. I was beginning to widen my understanding. I was cultivating loving kindness without really doing anything to cultivate it except reading my slogans and trying to figure out, what the hell does this mean? And then when at some point I moved back home to Seattle. And when I moved back home to Seattle, I began to go to Seattle Insight, and I went to a beginning class. And this is the first time I had now meditative instructions. So I've been practicing for a good 10 years before I got those meditative instructions, and I thought I was on my way to enlightenment. I was close to awakening. I certainly wasn't a beginner. But when Rodney Smith, who was my teacher at the time, started instructing on what I was really doing when I was meditating, this aligning the mind and body together in one place, not even trying to care what's happening in the present moment, but just this aligning. That's what you're doing, to whoever wrote that little chat there. There's no effort required here. Your body is always in the present moment. Always. It's never not there. The mind is rarely there, but the body is always there. And so all we are really doing is learning how to turn our attention towards noticing what is arising with the body. To turn our attention from this constant world of thought to the world of seeing, hearing, tasting, feeling, sensing, smelling. This is the world we actually live in. And we're learning to turn our attention towards that. And when I started turning my attention towards that, what arose was anxiety. I started having panic attacks. I thought coming to Rodney and Seattle Insight ruined my practice. I had it all together. We were still and happy, and I'm coming into this open heart, love and compassion. And here I go to Seattle Insight. I start practicing with the proper instructions, and next thing I know, I'm feeling anxiety all the time. I had to learn what was happening here. I was calling it anxiety, but it's not anxiety. It is not, we call this anxiety, but it's reverberation. It's like our bodies are a still pond, very pristine and still. And then some leaf in the tree above us, ink, comes undone. Ding! Hits our still pond. You didn't ask for that leaf. You didn't do anything about the leaf. It just floats down from whatever conditioning come together, and it touches the pond. And when it touches your pond, when it touches you, there is a reverberation. So we immediately see the reverberation and we don't like it, messing up our still pond. We drop down and we try to smooth our pond back out again. Smooth it out. To fix it. And the more we try to smooth it out, the worse it gets. The more we get angry because we can't get it back smooth again. And we get desperate trying to smooth it back out. Adding more reverberations every time we touch the water. Ding, 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 ding. Creating all these little reverberations. At some point, we stop all of that. Give up. That's what Ian is saying. We give up. That's it. Fine. My stillness is gone. Reverberations just keep going, and then eventually they go, and we're back to our still pond again. But it takes something to learn how to not drop down and immediately try to fix the reverberation. That's what we're learning. How do I not follow that impulse to fix the reverberation? How do I learn how to trust that the impact of things on my life will reverberate out? That's what we're learning. That's what this practice, that's what it's all about. Something that I begin to see over time as I spent all those years with Rodney and Seattle Insight was that my willingness to put up with the reverberation was stronger in Sangha than it was when I was not. And so my strength came from going to Sangha and sitting for 45 minutes with anxiety, because it never left. And I would sit with this anxiety. At home during the week, yeah, no sitting with no anxiety. But then I would go once a week and I would sit with this anxiety. And the sitting with the anxiety, eventually I begin to see that this anxiety had nothing to do with me, and it had nothing to do with whether some storm or dangerous thing was about to happen. It would just arise. When I say it had nothing to do with me, meaning the arising of the anxiety had nothing to do with me. It was like the mind just got triggered by something. But how long that anxiety stayed, that had to do with me. And as soon as I tried to get rid of it, it would stay longer. Do you see what I'm pointing to? In this practice, in this practice, we are forever trying to learn how to allow the unfolding of the present moment to unfold, to distinguish, to determine what in any given moment is your adding to the suffering and what is the naturally occurring conditioning and dukkha of life. This is what our practice is. The only time you can make this discernment is if you're in the present moment. If your mind and your body is in this present moment, you can see in present tense awareness how bad the situation is. If you're in your thinking mind, your ordinary mind, it may see a situation and boom, it thinks this is terrible. We gotta go. So I want to give you an example. I taught the February month-long. And when I taught the February month-long, we had a COVID test in the beginning before. It was at Spirit Rock, and we had the COVID test that you had to take right before the retreat started, and then you had to take another one about 4 or 5 days in. It was supposed to be 5 days in, and then they told us at the last minute, oh, we made a mistake. It's 4 days in. They told us 5 days in. I think they told us 4 days in, and then they said it's 3 days in. I can't remember. Anyway, the morning they told us, I was not prepared. And I come from a lot of trauma. So when the mind is not prepared for something, it gets a little catastrophic. I call it the trauma mind. It freaks out. It thinks all hell's about to break loose. So I go into the hall where we're taking the test, and I'm sitting there waiting. I've taken my test and I'm sitting there waiting peacefully for my results, 15 minutes. I have not been anywhere. I came to Spirit Rock like a week before that retreat started, and I had taken no less than 4 tests. And I've pretty much been right there on that campus. So the likelihood that I'm going to test positive is pretty slim. But that does not work for the trauma mind, because it didn't expect this to happen. And so it is screaming bloody murder. It yelled at me for packing too many clothes, and I won't be able to get out fast enough. They'll be so mad at me, they'll kick me out, and I won't have any time to pack. It yelled at me for not making reservations at a hotel just in case. I should have been prepared. If I had been prepared, I would know where I'm going to go, but I'm going to be homeless, nowhere to go. How am I going to even get on an airplane? It fussed at me for not coming prepared for testing positive. It just complained about the system and what they did, and they should have told us. And it's so wrong that they didn't tell us. I mean, it just screamed. And I sat there watching how peaceful the room was. I sat there with my eyes open, noticing, listening. Silence. No one was talking. We're in silence. Everybody's moving around gently and peacefully. Every once in a while, you'd hear the lady go over to someone and say, okay, you're free to go now. Put the little strap on that you got tested and you were negative. It's just all very peaceful, very nice. Everyone was nice to each other. I'm watching and I'm noticing. That's the world I was living in. I was not living in this angry mind that was traumatized. That's the mind I always lived in before I began to bring mind and body in the present moment. So my attention is on the other sense doors, not the mind. It's just one sense door. I'm seeing, hearing, sensing, and here she comes, and here's my mind. Here she comes, get ready. Oh, I know it's going to be the end. She said, okay, Tuere, you're free to go. And she put the little thing on me. And what happened to the trauma mind? Gone. No, thank you. No, I'm sorry. My bad. I made a mistake. Nothing. Gone. Because now in the present moment, it has new information. It moves on to something else. So when we learn how to come into the present moment, we're operating not under the mind's projections about what's happening. We learn to operate in the present moment, just what's happening, not our grumblings about what's happening. That is the distinction between this first arrow, life is hard, and the second arrow, our grumbling about it. So for the person that was saying about this uncertainty and anxiety, the place where uncertainty and anxiety does not reside is actually in the present moment. We feel like the anxiety and the uncertainty is in the present moment, but actually you're in your mind with a body that's in the present moment. So you turn your attention to what you actually see, what you're actually seeing. You can stay in the mind wondering about what's going to happen in the future. Or you could notice that right here, right now, it's fine. I don't know what's going to happen. And sometimes we can discern what we can do, but sometimes we can't. Sometimes we have to depend on something else. It's like my son is sick. So every once in a while he has pain or some difficulty, and we have to wait for the doctors to tell us what's happening. I can get frantic with anxiety, and I have. And then there are times when I can keep coming back to the present moment. Right now, we're okay. This is all that's happening. We'll wait until tomorrow to find out what the test results say. Sometimes that's all you can do, is to keep reminding yourself, keep coming back. Right now, right here, this is where we are. We'll wait till tomorrow to find out. We'll wait till Monday to find out about the Friday night's test. Sometimes that's all we can do. But the idea is to begin to learn that your practice is not to solve the anxiety, but to come to the present moment, to see the thorn that's lodged in your heart, to see this arrow that's lodged in the heart, to help you release that, so that you can do. So I'm going to leave you with a poem here, and then we'll open it up for some questions and see where you're at before we go. This is a poem I love called Longing by Julie Cadwallader Stobbs. This is what I think I've been pointing to in this talk. Julie says, consider the black-pole warbler. She tips the scales at 1 ounce before she migrates, taking off from the seacoast to our east, flying higher and higher, ascending 2 or 3 miles. I don't know if you've ever seen a black-pole warbler, but when I read this poem the first time, they're about this big. They got wings that are like this big, little wings. So consider the black-pole warbler. When you're thinking about your life, you consider the black-pole warbler. 1 ounce. Tipping the scales 1 ounce before she migrates, taking off from the seacoast to our east, flying higher and higher, ascending 2 or 3 miles during her 80 hours of flight until she lands in Tobago, north of Venezuela, 3 days older and weighing half as much. She flies over open ocean almost the whole way. Oh, she is not so different from us. The arc of our lives is a mystery too. We do not understand, we cannot see what guides us on our way. That longing that pulls us towards light. Not knowing, we fly onward, hearing the dull roar of the waves below. So the reason why I'd like you to consider the black-pole warbler, you got to get a picture of it, put it up there. Because I'm sure the black-pole warbler, whenever it dies and goes to heaven, it's going to say, what the hell? You couldn't have given that migration path to like the big eagles or all these gigantic birds. You got to give it to me. I got wings this big. I got to fly up 2 or 3 miles. And then I have to go 80 miles and fly for 3 days over water. This is a mandatory migration path that I got to take. You couldn't have given that to somebody else? You couldn't have given me a little jump over to the next town, next county? You couldn't have brought us into the warm weather and that's where we're born so we don't have to fly? We could have started out in Venezuela and stayed in Venezuela. No. So this black-pole warbler, I doubt very much she complains on that process. I believe she just flies all the way. Grateful when she lands in Tobago. But imagine us. We will complain the entire time. We will complain about the weather, about how far we have to go, about how high, how unfair it is. Constant complaining. And that complaining is what the Buddha said was the first ennobling truth. That constant whining about what is as it is our pain. That is our difficulty. Our practice is to learn how to not get trapped in that complaining about not liking the way something is. The way it is the way it is. Now, does that mean you don't discern what can I do to make things softer, easier, better? Yeah, you could. But if you're a black-pole warbler and you're stuck with having to go to Tobago and you're flying over ocean, there really isn't that much you can do except keep flapping. Keep flapping those little wings in 3 days until you get there. You can't think about, oh, I can't wait till I get there. You can't grumble about the situation. You have to just be in the moment. Flying. That's it. This is what I think the Buddha was trying to point to. And the blackpoll warbler doesn't think like us, but I don't know if having a mind the way we have our minds is necessarily a better thing. It might be better if we were just, simpler mind, less capacity. Anyway, so consider the blackpoll warbler when you're feeling yourself tight and caught in some scenario, and see if there's not a way you can let go of that and see how much of the present moment you can just accept that this is the way it is until you can do something to change it.